In this movie, we'll add ceilings to our model. Ceilings are a pretty simple object to add, and that's because there's a really handy automatic ceiling creation tool that we have that will automatically see the boundary walls that surround a room and create a ceiling in there. But in situations where that's not appropriate, we can also sketch our ceiling. So the first thing I want to do when talking about ceilings is show you the most common mistake that folks make when they start to add the ceilings. So I'm here in a level 1 floor plan, and I go to Architecture tab and click my ceiling button. And then I see this handy little automatic ceiling tool over here, and I say, yep, that's great. And I come over here and I click a point in this room, and nothing happens. And there's a warning message that appears down here, and it's basically saying you can't see the element that you just created. And the reason for that is we're looking at a floor plan, and so we're cutting at about 1,200 millimeters and looking down, and the ceiling is well above our head. So what I'm going to do here is undo that ceiling, cancel out of the command, and then come over here to my project browser and expand ceiling plans and open up my level 1 ceiling plan. So the level 1 ceiling plan is cut at a more appropriate height for ceilings, and it's reflected ceiling, so it's actually seeing what's above rather than what's below. So once you've done that, then you're ready to actually start adding ceilings. So let's go back to the ceiling button, and this time let's pay a little closer attention to some of the options that we have available. Now, on the ribbon, we have the two choices. We have automatic ceiling and sketch ceiling. So we're going to start with automatic. Over here on the properties palette, there are some ceiling types already built into the template that we started with. So we have 2 acoustical ceiling tile grids here, 2 different sizes, and then just a simple plain ceiling. So why don't we start with the 600 by 1,200 millimeter acoustical ceiling tile grid? And I'll add that to all of my offices. I've got an office here, here, and here. I've got 2 over here. And then this one here is slightly problematic, as you can see, because when I highlight the boundary, it's actually flowing down into the conference space as well. So don't click that one just yet. What I'm going to do is cancel with the modify tool. And the solution to that problem is quite simple. This wall right here stops at the column instead of going all the way to this wall. So what we can do is go to modify, go to the trim and extend command, select the exterior wall as our boundary edge, and then just extend this wall. Now you really won't see any change here, but if you go back to architecture, click your ceiling button again, now you can see that that's an enclosed space. So if you ever run into that in your own projects, it's a real easy fix. Just make sure that everything is kind of airtight, if you will. All right, let's change to a different shape ceiling, maybe the 600 by 600, and then let's look at another setting, the height offset from level. So by default, it's coming in at 2,600 millimeters, which is a decent height for the offices, but maybe I want it to be a little bit taller in the conference room. So I can just change the height anytime I like. So let's go with 28 there, and I'll pick the point there in the conference room. Now, perhaps the break room is a little bit shorter, so I'll go with 2,400, and I'll use the same 2x2 and place that one there. Now, we also have a plain ceiling, which is basically just a drywall ceiling. I'll stick with 2,400 for that one and place that in the 2 restrooms. Now, it's not immediately evident that anything happened there, so if you want to prove to yourself that you actually did create a ceiling there, what you can do is cut a section right here, cancel out, double-click the section head to open it up, and there's the 2 plain ceilings that we added in the toilet rooms. Here's the one in the break room and the 2 in the offices. So let me go ahead and close this section. So that's the ceilings that we can do with the automatic tool. Now out here in the lobby area, this is a double volume space on the right, and then here is a balcony up above. So we want to put a ceiling underneath that balcony only. So that one, unfortunately, if we try and do it with auto ceiling, it's going to flow into the whole space. So there's where we're going to look at the sketch ceiling option. Now this displays all the familiar sketch tools that if you watched the last 2 movies, you've already seen, and it works exactly the same way as it did when creating floors and roofs. So we can choose whatever tool we want, lines or any of the other shapes. In this case, I'm going to start with pick walls because I find that nice and convenient. And I'll make my first sketch line with this wall, and then this one, and this one up at the top. Now, if I zoom in a little bit here, you can see there's a line out here for the balcony. That's the line I want to use, but that's not a wall, so it won't select it with the pick walls. So I'm going to switch to pick lines instead, and then I can highlight that wall. Now, I also need a small little line going across here. Now, you could draw it with the line, or you could do pick again. It's up to you, but draw that small little line, and then obviously we have some cleanup to do. So I'll just use trim and extend a corner, take my small line, trim it to there, You got to pick it carefully here. Remember, pick the side you want to keep. So inside right here and then to there. You can see it creates that little notch. Then here to here, then here to here, and then finally these two at the top. Cancel out and finish, and that will create the ceiling plane. Now, I still had the plane ceiling selected, which is fine if that's the ceiling type that you want. But with it still selected, you can actually change it to any other type. So if I wanted to use the 2x2 instead, you can also change the height of it. So if I want to raise it up to 2600, so you can make whatever changes you like while that ceiling plane is selected. Now, if you take a look at the orientation of these 600 by 1200 grids, and let's zoom in over here on these two offices to talk about that, they match the orientation of the room. Now, that's fine. It's a good assumption for Revit to make, but let's say that you didn't want that. Maybe you want them to go in another direction. Maybe you want to shift them in some way. Well, if you move your mouse around on these grids, you'll notice that the actual grid lines themselves will select. And you can click on them, and that activates some of our modify tools, such as move and rotate. So if I go to the move command, I can actually move this tile, and I'm going to move it half a tile, so it's a 600 millimeter tile, so let me type 300 here. And notice that the effect is that it actually shifts the entire pattern. So you can select whatever line is convenient, but know that you're going to move the whole pattern. The same is true with rotate. Let me change the center of the rotation to an intersection right there. Let me start the rotation along the line, and then let me rotate it 90 degrees. And you see that that will rotate the entire grid pattern. So it makes it really convenient for you to start off by placing these with the automatic ceiling, but then adjust the patterns to fit the design of the room. Now, the real question is, how do you know how much you want to shift and rotate by just looking at the grid? Probably what you need is to get some light fixtures in here so that you can make better decisions. So let me zoom back out again, and let's focus over here on these offices. And let's add a few light fixtures in here. So you add light fixtures just using the component tool that we've already talked about in a previous movie. Now, if you open up the list and scroll through, you're not going to find any light fixtures currently loaded in this file. So we're going to have to come over here to Load Family and load in some light fixtures. So in my metric library, in my lighting folder, architectural, and then internal, you can see there's a whole collection of light fixtures here. And you're welcome to load in whichever ones you like. Well, in this case, I'm going to load in a troffer rectangular light here, just a simple office-style light fixture. And notice that it won't let me place it. So similar to doors and windows, this particular light fixture is actually a hosted element, and it requires specifically a ceiling host. So if you're out here, it won't place, but here it will see the ceiling and it will allow you to place it. Now, what I usually do is I kind of place it randomly, and then I cancel the command. And the reason I do that is it's easier to get it precisely lined up with the grid using the align command. So I'm going to grab one of the edges of the grid and align that to the edge of the light, and then another edge of the grid and the edge of the light. Okay, so I get the first one positioned correctly first, then I'll select it and copy it. So I'll copy from this corner, maybe to right here, and then I'll select both of these and go from this corner to right here. Now, you can select these and copy them to other rooms if you like here and here. But it's pretty obvious that the light fixtures don't really sit correctly in the rooms, and in fact, they're going right through the walls. So that's where, now that we can see that, we can go back and use the techniques I showed you a moment ago to kind of shift the grid to a more appropriate spacing. So I'm going to select this grid line right here, go to the move command, pick any base point, and I'm going to move half a tile. So it's a 1200 millimeter grid, so I'll type 600. And then same thing in the other direction, and move it half a tile, 300. And now it's centered a little better. Now I'd have to repeat that for these, 300 and 300. But in the other direction, I can use the align command. So I can align this grid to this one and this grid to this one. And so as you can see, once you kind of get in the flow, it'll move pretty quickly. So all of your similar spaces, you can get them lined up and oriented with one another in a pretty convenient way. So when you're placing ceilings, automatic ceiling is by far the quickest and easiest thing to use. But in cases where you have a more complex ceiling, you can always switch over to a sketch mode. If you've got a grid pattern assigned to that ceiling, you can move and adjust it just simply using move and rotate. And placing light fixtures are useful to help you make decisions about exactly what orientation you want those grid patterns to have.